morning, video games. Welcome to Filthy Casuals, a podcast about video games hosted by three very kind and extremely knowledgeable boys. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Tommy Dasilo, and of course, with me as always...
It's Ben Vanel here. Tommy, how you going? Good to be here. What's new?
Mild panic attack this week. That's about it for me. How about you?
Yeah. Honestly, literally nothing. And why don't we just hurry up and bring in our third co-host, because I have fucking nothing to talk about.
My name's Adam Knox, and I've got some interesting nightmares I've been having, if you want to go into those. That's pretty much it. The little bit of time that I've been able to sleep has been full of nightmares.
That's a good new segment. We used to have Fashion Corner. Now we can have Nightmare Corner.
Yes. Yeah.
Nightmare Roundup. I was communicating with a ghost, and to tell me that it hated me, it was yanking my covers off. I was like, "Do you mean me harm?" And it was to say yes, it would yank my covers off.
I had a great dream. You guys will love this. So I was I believe I was in LA in this dream. I was walking around. I stumble across who else but one of my comedy idols, Nathan Fielder.
Oh yeah,
meet Nathan Fielder, and I'm talking to him, and he's very casual.
Your little bed sheet slowly rising up as you're sleeping.
And so I'm getting to know him, and he reveals, I've actually got a Netflix show. I've been commissioned to do a Netflix show. I'm so excited about this, to hear this in this dream. And I tell him that, I've been involved in comedy for a while. I've been, have done some sketch stuff. And he was like, so you're like a comedy person. I was like, yeah. He's like, we're hiring. We're hiring a bunch of people. We're hiring writers. We're hiring a bunch of people. I'm like, great. Well, you just heard my CV. Would you like to hire me as a writer? And he says, I see you more as a producer. And so that is...
So you still got a job on the show.
You still got a job. A better paying job.
What a nightmare, having to work in production rather than the lower paid job of a writer.
I woke up in a cold sweat and I...
I'm a money man.
Ben, as you started describing that dream, this is completely true. Zoom came up with a notification for me saying that my connection was unstable, almost as if my internet was going, come on, man, do you really want to use this connection to hear about some cunt's dream? Honestly, this is a misuse of this service that some people really need at the moment.
Yeah, no, I've got many more dreams I can describe in which I meet comedy idols and they offer me very good jobs. If you want to hear some more nightmares,
maybe you could facilitate somebody else describing the dreams, but I don't know if you're the right person to actually describe them. Maybe you need to be in a sort of a role where you're making sure that someone else has the resources they need to be able to describe their dreams.
Sure, maybe throwing in some ideas of what their dreams might be about, but in the end, it's up to them.
Don't be pushy with
it. I've heard this on a podcast. I think that people have been dreaming a lot more lately because their dreams have been much more nostalgic and intense and very detailed because there's nothing going on. That usually your brain power is used up overnight to sort of filter the day's experiences, but now there's no one's experiencing anything, so they're having these crazy detailed dreams. I've definitely been dreaming more than I was before.
Yeah. I've had very vivid dreams every time I've slept.
That's really interesting, the nostalgia thing, because since this, and this is completely true, since all of this kicked off, I've had 3 separate dreams where I was hanging out with Jamiroquai. That's completely true. That's not a fabrication. I keep
Did he offer you a job as a
Jamiroquai.
sound mixer on one of his future albums?
No, that's beneath me. He offered me the job of lead vocalist in Jamiroquai. JK said, I'm kicking myself out of the band so that you can be the new me.
Tommy, it sounds like you are going virtually insane.
But this does tie into sort of one of the. This is a bit of a stretch to call this a game, but it is readily available on the iPhone, and there is a degree of competitiveness involved with it. I've been playing the mobile game Sleep Cycle, where
Oh, yeah. Yes.
your iPhone
Yeah.
monitors you overnight and then gives you a little grade at the in the next day of how well you've been sleeping. Gives you a little graph of how often you are waking up and what kind of a deep sleep when you're in deep sleeps and everything like that. If you were snoring, it tells you when and it records you.
Now, this app seems redundant because I have a girlfriend who
Right.
will absolutely tell me every single one of these things and how it affected her sleep.
Yeah. This is TMI, but I put the app on the other night and then I couldn't sleep.
Oh, no.
So I got the laptop out and had a bit of treated
Had a
myself
bit of Nathan for you.
treated myself to a bit of nature's Milo, and
Yes.
and now I'm just because the app uses the microphone to tell if you're awake or not,
Yeah.
and so
it
because
certainly
I'd already put the app on, and so now I'm like, oh, Apple just has a recording of me doing that. That's
Oh, God.
If it makes you feel any better, they already had several of them. That you didn't need the
Good
app
point.
to do that. It's fine. You could dig that up of anybody.
But the kind of the weird thing about it is like it has become pretty addictive to like get that graph and you get like a little ranking
for
of
sure.
What quality. But it's kind of frustrating because like you can't really do anything about it. Like if you get a thing where it's like, hey, you didn't get enough steps today. Okay, well, cool. I guess I've got to go on a longer walk tomorrow, or I go for a run or whatever it is. But this is just like, yeah, your sleep quality was 65%, and it's like, great. I'd love it to be 100. I don't know.
Oh.
What do
What's
I do?
your high
though?
score? What's your high
What if
score,
you
Tommy?
get-
Because I use Sleep Cycle as well. I've been using it for
Yep.
about a year.
Okay.
I've used
What
it
if you-
less recently because I use it usually as an alarm. That's sort of how it works. It goes
Yep.
off, in the morning. I haven't had to get up in the morning for
Right.
the past little while. I'm back on it this week though. I've sort of got some part-time hours with work, so my high score for this week, my best sleep quality has been 89%, which is not
okay. See, I don't really get this. Like, I've got so from last night, for example, I'll hold up to the camera. So, can you see the graph there? I'm in a deep
Yeah.
sleep like most of the night.
Oh, wow.
Can you see that?
Well,
Yeah.
I'll show you mine. Yeah,
and
that's
it's
incredible.
telling me
That's a great.
that I slept for 8 hours and 38 minutes, but then
But
it's
it's
saying my
probab-
quality was only 70%.
But it's probably not a good thing to be constantly in deep sleep. You want to be in and out. Like it's natural to come in and out of
Sure.
sleep cycles.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you're constantly in that deep state, it probably means, well, A, that the deep state is tracking you, and it always has been, and they're create a
Absolutely.
new world order. But
Yeah, it's
also
listening
that
to you
deep
jerk off.
that deep state of sleep, I think, is like if you're remaining in that, it's a sign that it's not high quality while you're in it.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Right.
I'm not a sleep
Okay.
doctor, but I'm going to pretend to be for the purposes of this. And I'm also never going to download this app because I know I'll get competitive and just remain awake all night staring at my phone, pretending to be asleep so that I can have the high score.
Right.
Hey, Ben,
you
what
can
do you think of that?
artificially-
That's from Monday night.
Oh,
Whoa.
fuck yeah.
Not bad. He's done it.
99%
Bed.
sleep.
He's
Time in
only
bed
done
is
it.
great as well. I'm never in bed that long. I'm usually sort of it'd be like in bed about 8 hours, asleep sort of 6 to 7.
Oh, really? Yeah. I'm
that's
in there
very
fucking
impressive.
around for ages, just reading and checking the phone and doing all
Oh,
that.
here's a good
A
one
lot of screen
actually.
time before bed.
Feast your eyes upon that.
Oh, 100%
Bullshit.
quality.
Yeah.
No one has
Sleep for 7 hours
100%
and
good
54.
sleep.
Yeah. And so I was looking at my overall graph, my month's graph, and you'll notice the quality really picks up around the time of a certain global crisis. Genuinely.
Wow.
December, January, February, terrible. I'm stressing out. I've got
Yep.
heaps of shit going on in my life. Work's fucking me over. And then all of a sudden, the end of the world happens and I'm sleeping like a baby.
Vindicated. He's loving
If
it.
you at home want to know what Ben's sleep quality graph looks like, get an unemployment graph and just flip it upside down.
Yeah.
And that is
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly
Hey,
how it looks.
You could get my unemployment graph and flip it upside down. It turns out I prefer to live a life of leisure and debt. But I've been playing that too, Tommy. It's a great game, great mobile game. I recommend it.
but it's frustrating because it's like I don't know. The information is kind of useless to have because it's like it's in the past and there's no it doesn't really tell you anything about like what you could do to. Or I don't know,
Right.
maybe if you use it more, if it's like, I think apparently if you use it with in conjunction with the Apple Watch, which is measuring your heart rate during the day and your steps, it probably starts to go, hey, maybe exercise more during the day and you'll sleep better. Maybe it does that, but I just kind of find it frustrating because it's like, yeah, low quality, and it's like, well, all right, well.
But what do you expect out of this app for you to like wake up in the morning? It's like, hey, you did some stuff when you were like 14 that you still feel bad about and that you regret a little bit, so you've got to make amends for that. That's what you were. That's how come you missed that couple of hours last night.
Yeah, right.
Well,
I mean, if you're gonna have the microphone on and be monitoring me all the time anyway, then just be in my fucking brain and get to the heart of it and work it out for me.
Well, I know I do stuff to try and sleep better. So like I think we talked about this maybe even on the Patreon pod. Surely not on the regular video games themed podcast that we do. But
That's not this one, right? We're not currently recording that, surely.
No. If that was the case, we would be complete fools and would need to apologize to our listeners for wasting their time. I did stuff like slept with more pillows, slept with less pillows. I started like having like sinus, like using like sinus clearing stuff, like just different ways to make myself sleep better, and I would be able to test if they worked or not. And they all did, and I just have to stick to them.
They all did? You slept better with more and with less pillows?
Yep.
Just having a medium number of pillows is the only thing that makes you sleep poorly. You just got to have either too many or too few pillows. You're like,
I've either got to be leaning forwards 45 degrees or backwards 45 degrees.
I need to sleep on a bare bed with no with no sheets or anything, or the bed of a Maharaja covered in pillows and concubines.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'll tie this back into to actual video games because talking about how keeping active can be a good way of getting more sleep, and so a way that I've been trying to make sure I'm getting enough activity in my day is this thing that I've been playing during the week. So during the weekend, I was hanging out with my girlfriend. We were at the supermarket. I was just like having a day where I was like very frustrated by the situation and feeling very cooped up and like, not being able to go places and stuff. And then for some reason, this thought just popped into my head where I went, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go right into eBay right now and I'm going to buy a copy of Just Dance. And so I plonked down my $70 for a crisp new copy of Just Dance 2020. Can
I point out?
Yep.
I just want to point out, I saw you posted a photo in our group chat of you buying that game for full price, whilst it was at that very moment on sale for half price on the eShop.
Really?
Yeah.
Fuck. I think something about like getting it just seemed to make the most sense to get it physically because I was like, I might hate this and I want to be able to take it, on sell it or whatever, return it.
That's why I've been hesitant to play this as well, because we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I think, Tommy, about this could be a good potential way to stay fit in ISO. But I've played the demo. I'm curious to hear what you thought of the full game, though.
So this never would have been on my radar, outside of the current moment. But I chucked it on. My girlfriend was with me, and I had a fucking great time. It is, even calling it a game is kind of loose because it's, so you hold on the Switch, at least you hold one Joy-Con. You can also use your phone as a controller if you don't have enough Joy-Con, which is a pretty cool touch. And it just, you're mirroring the moves that are on the screen. It kind of grades you. It seems to be pretty lenient about how closely you need to follow the moves. Like you can still
this
get a
isn't
bad
like
score,
a rhythm
but
game.
Yeah.
Like a what's the drum one that you got the peripheral for?
Rock Band. Oh, Taco something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I played the demo of that, and that's like spot on, really good rhythm game. You obviously have to be quite exact with the movements, and it's a real, it's a real boon to have the Joy-Con because they're so precise. But I played the demo of Just Dance, and it's really fucking loose. I felt I couldn't get into it. I found it really, really hard to play because I thought I was supposed to be matching the exact movements on the screen, and I was like, this is impossible. It's a person moving faster than me doing a dance I've never seen before.
Yeah, I think it's really one of those things where the game isn't really happening on the screen. The game isn't anything you're controlling within it. The game is you in a room with friends, all looking like fucking idiots and having a laugh at each other. Playing it by myself in isolation, I don't know that, I think I'd get bored of it pretty quickly. But scrolling through the list of songs with my girlfriend to find ones that one of us knows or both of us knows or whatever, and then just looking like complete fucking idiots, and then getting a grade at the end of it, it's fun. Like I get it now as a party thing. I totally get the appeal of it. And so if you're holed up in a share house, if you've got a partner who's doesn't really play games or whatever, and you're looking for like a super easy thing where it's just you hand the remote to someone or the phone if you don't even have a second controller. And you just put this dumb thing on the screen and you just try and match it and you look stupid, and there's good songs on there. It comes with a trial of like the entire back catalogue of Just Dance, which is like 500 plus songs. The worst thing about it is it's kind of tricky to scroll through that. Like they're kind of all organised pretty weirdly, but man, there's tons of shit on there, and just it's just simple and silly and a fun distraction. It's just pure distraction. Yeah.
Would you say there's any benefit to it over like looking up a video of like aerobics Oz style and trying to just copy them? Like what's the... If it's not tracking your movement and there's not really much game to it, is there any point to it over just dancing to a music video in your living room?
Yeah, it did feel a little bit like that. I mean, it probably, I think it shows you a little bit more what to do than if you were just watching the video clip. And as lenient as it is with marking you, the fact that you do get a little grade at the end, and you get points to unlock avatars and stuff within the game, like getting those little things at the end of it does give you that little rush of like, you get to the end and you see your score kind of rack up, and then it gives you a star rating and a grade and all that kind of stuff. So it's probably just, I mean, paying full price is probably a bit much, but if it's on sale now, and the other thing is it's a good workout. Like you chuck 3 songs on. I was fucked by the end of it. So it's definitely a good one for just, good pop songs. It's great that there's actual real songs on there and not just, naff made up ones just for this. It's like hits that, you recognize and remember. It's fun. I've for whatever reason, I've always kind of looked down my nose a bit at the Just Dance franchise, and now I'm like, I'm totally a convert.
I'm the same. It's always felt like just like a weird novelty thing. Even like something like, like you said, like you mentioned before, Rock Band, or even SingStar. Maybe it's because I'm more interested in singing, but Just Dance has always felt like, this is a children's toy that happens to be on a console.
Yeah, and like I said, outside of this current moment, I wouldn't have looked twice at it. But I had a good time with it.
Dancing is fun.
Dancing is fun. What about you guys? What have you been taking in this week?
Well, the exact opposite of your experience of like, I want something casual and fun, and I want to be able to move around a bunch and have a good time socially. I've been trying out my new graphics card with ray tracing enabled on several games.
Not only does that not involve playing with people, it pushes people who might want to play with you away in future occasions.
The experience of testing out tech stuff on a computer to try and push it as far as it'll go, having that suck, and then pulling it back as little as possible. You know what I mean? Like trying to push your computer up to the maximum of what it's capable of is an experience that makes me not want to do it as well. It is an unpleasant... It's the whole reason that for a long time I moved away from games on a PC, because the constant second guessing of myself that I do whilst playing a game of like, could I have turned up the fucking anti-aliasing a little bit more than this?
Right.
Could this look slightly smoother? Because I'd give I shouldn't think so much about it, but it ends up drilling its way into the back of my head.
Well, hold on, Adam, because that doesn't sound too dissimilar to what I was just talking about, because it sounds like you and the computer are locked in a beautiful dance with each other.
I guess so. I guess you could call it that.
I guess you could too. That's why, yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to weigh in here. I lend my voice to the positive. That sounds like you definitely would describe it in that.
Thanks,
Like,
Ben.
honestly,
For sure.
I'm not going to be on the affirmative team here. I think with this particular moment, I'm going to have to be on possibly the wrong side of history and say that it is nothing at all like dancing, one tiny bit.
Get a load of the mayor from Footloose over here.
No dancing, only direct computer interpretations of light streams. That's all that's allowed in this town. Ray tracing, if you don't know, is a newish technology that NVIDIA is championing. Who, by the way, NVIDIA, I think today said that all of their employees are getting pay rises during this and nobody is losing their job, which,
Wow.
good on
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, I saw this. Despite, I think, their gaming service, GeForce Now, or whatever it's called, like losing access to titles by the day. But yeah, that
Which
I mean, it makes sense. That there's companies that are going to be thriving during this because of exactly what they supply.
Well, and they're, I think, supplying video cards for both the PS5 and Xbox Series X. I shouldn't have said that because I'm almost definitely wrong. But
It's definitely one of them.
they're probably involved.
Yeah.
But people would be buying less of this stuff right now. Manufacturing is obviously an issue. So it's not like they could do it easily. So good on them for doing that. But so ray tracing is like a big sort of modern technology that pretty much enables a video card to be able to directly process light. So lighting in games is fake currently. I mean, all graphics in all video games are fake. None of it's real. But the way that lighting is done currently, and I am in no way an expert, again, but I will plow on. The way that lighting is done is by pretending... Oh, fuck, I'm not even going to bother trying. This is a new way of doing it.
So the dance continues.
It more closely simulates a real-world version of how light would be filtered through materials, how light would dissipate off of different materials, and how reflections would appear on reflective materials.
Right.
It is, from what I've seen, and so I tried, there's a version of Quake 2 that has this built in as like a tech demo. I tried it with Battlefield 5, and I tried it with... So Minecraft has a new beta that does ray tracing.
Right.
And you'd think Minecraft, well, cool, that's a very simple-looking game. It'd be very easy to see where exactly the improvements from ray tracing are, which is kind of the case. But with all of them that I tried, maybe I'm a fucking idiot, but the difference to me is pretty subtle.
Right.
Or at the very least, your eye adjusts to it very quickly because it's trying to emulate more closely what you would expect to see in the real world. Maybe it's that your brain isn't picking up on the effort there because it looks, closer to what your brain expects to see.
I think that makes
sense.
sense.
What it is.
Like the brain already is compensating for average to good graphics as it is. Like we already make so many leaps, within our little machine in our head that makes things look like things to us. I guess, if it's like, oh, that's slightly closer to photorealistic.
Right.
I wonder if the gradient of what our brain is doing, it's like, it's just still somewhere in that range of,
because you can definitely see the difference for sure. And like if you flick it from on and off and on and off, you see the difference completely. But then you start moving around and you play it for like 30 seconds and you're taking it for granted already.
Right. Yeah.
And the improvements that it gives aren't that much to me over what exists in that pre-baked, faked way that video games do lighting now. The difference isn't that stark to me. Now,
right, it's not like several $1,000s worth of difference.
Yeah, and like maybe the benefits for a developer are in that they don't have to put any effort into thinking about the lighting because it's all kind of done for them, with just the graphics rendering or however the fuck it's done. I'm using words that I have read, taken in the context of, but never the meaning. Also, when ray tracing is enabled in all of these games, it is so much more demanding. So you are having Minecraft run at like fucking 20 frames a second,
right,
on a relatively new and pretty fucking expensive graphics card, because you've turned on this technology which doesn't make an appreciable difference for the performance hit that it takes, in my opinion. So the fact that both Sony and Microsoft have been talking about ray tracing heaps for their new consoles, if it's built in from the ground up for them to expect it, cool. But it means, A, that I think, you know, the era of this game runs pretty poorly at 30 frames a second, that era is not over, because people are going to be trying to target this ray tracing stuff and improve the visual fidelity in that way at the expense of things running at 60 frames a second. And this new computer and the VR especially, which is like forced on the Rift S to run at 80 frames a second, I'm starting to appreciate that stuff more. That smoothness really does have an impact on how you interact with a game, versus the ray tracing stuff, which for me has had some impact on how a game looks, absolutely no impact on how a game plays.
Yeah.
So it's nice, but it seems superfluous, definitely, and demanding and kind of costly in a performance way that isn't directly doesn't pay for itself. What's that word?
Yeah, right.
I'm so fucking tired, by the way, from how little I'm listening. But I've done an amazing job there. That, if you've ever seen a person, you know, like when somebody gets to the end of a marathon and they're like almost shitting themselves and they're falling over themselves. That's how I felt at the end of that series of sentences. Someone just fucking throwing water on me, just straight on a stretcher immediately after the marathon.
Yeah, it was a lot to take on.
Yeah.
But I don't get it yet. It looks nice. You can watch videos of it that look a hell of a lot more impressive than seeing it in action actually does, because when you're having a video point out, look at this reflection, and it's exactly what is rendered in the world shown back to you in a reflection. How fucking often are you looking at a reflection?
Yeah.
Unless you're, you know, a hairdresser or something, then you probably look in the mirror all the time. But if you're...
That's true. A hairdresser simulator will absolutely need ray tracing to be implemented.
You need incredible mirror stuff. If you are doing that, then 100% this is worth it. If most of your surfaces aren't even that reflective, and when they are, you have to stop and look for it and then go like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah, nice. I don't see the benefit, the cost benefit thing of having it on versus having that power be placed somewhere else.
I kind of feel that way about like any kind of new tech thing, like 4K, I guess, is a good example, where the very like first moment that you're looking at it, you're like, oh yeah, cool. And then after like a minute or two, you're just kind of used to it, and it's like it loses that.
Right.
For anything where it's like it takes you a while to like upgrade, and you always think like, oh man, once I get this new TV that can handle this or whatever, it's going to be so sick. I'm just going to have my socks blown off like non-stop. And then it just within a couple of minutes, it's what, you know, it's always like a little bit. I even remember feeling that way about DVD when I was like a little kid, like getting the Matrix and like, you know, the first 10 minutes of it being like, oh my God. And then by the end of it, your eyes have gotten used to it. And it's like, I thought this would fix all the problems in my life, but.
And the difference in video game terms definitely is that, yes, that visual fidelity is nice to go, wow, look at this, isn't that incredible? But the losses that you're taking for it, specifically in frame rate, aren't worth the trade-off, because frame rate affects how you're experiencing the game moment to moment, whereas those little nice things, and the ray tracing stuff is very impressive, and it does look cool to be able to very quickly and dynamically affect the way lighting looks. It's cool to put like a blue block of glass down and have the light behind it realistically turn a little bit of a shade of blue. Is really cool.
Yeah.
You have to be looking for it, whereas you're really going to notice when a game is constantly slowing down because you're, you know, putting so much pressure on your video card through that.
Yeah.
So I
Just
don't know
quickly,
if it's worth it. Same as 4K,
I know you guys are going to
moment.
talk about this in depth a little more later. But Final Fantasy VII Remake. I was thinking last night, like I'm up to an area that's got a big bit in it where there's just kind of a lot of filler side quests. And I was thinking about it last night just in terms of this area that they've had to build and construct for the game that looks so detailed and so beautiful. I kind of understand the justification for putting the superfluous side missions in there, because if it weren't for them, you would kind of just pass through this area in the space of about 5 minutes and then you leave it and you don't come back to it for the game. So I kind of understand their justification. Last night it dawned on me them going, yeah, we spent hours rendering this beautifully.
Yeah.
We're not going to have you just cruise through it for 6 minutes. Hang out and savor it. We got to put some side quests in here to just make this feel like it was more worthwhile to build this whole fucking area and detail it so vividly.
Sure. It's like when a movie will show you 4 different angles of the same explosion. It's ah?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was an expensive explosion. We spent most of our budget on it. Damn right, you're going to see it from 5 fucking angles.
Literally, slow motion is just that. It's adding in more frames to emphasize the point that look how much petrol we had to use.
Go look for some fucking cats so that you can appreciate all these little villages that we've made and all the little tin roofs that we've put textures on.
Mm-hmm. That is the thing with those quests, is that there's several of them where it's guess who's fucking lost now?
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah.
First it was cats, now there's
have
some
a look.
kids gone missing.
Yeah. Go have a fucking look.
I don't think they're near any of those textures we didn't fully render, though. Ignore those. I don't think the kids are near them. Yeah. Anyway, so it's been fun messing around with a new computer, though, and seeing graphics look good. Half-Life Alex blew me away in that respect. But the ray tracing thing, there's a lot of hot air around it at the moment, but I am not getting it yet, and I am more than ready for those words to come back to haunt me. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But right now, it seems like one of those things where, when they just push in a direction where they're oh, we got this new thing and we need to seem like there's a big change and a big new crazy thing we can show off. It really seems like a fake one of them. The hair technology. Do you remember that? When The Witcher 3 was coming out? They were look at this fucking hair effect we've got. Every hair's rendered. And everyone was nah, turn it off. It's bullshit. It makes the whole game run shittily, and I'm never looking at their hair.
I remember lens flare was a big one in the late 90s.
Yep.
Every game had a bit where it's your camera passes across the sun. There's bullshit lens flare. When the 360 and the PS3 were coming out, there were a whole bunch of videos where they were just rendering NBA players and being look at these men sweat.
Yes, the sweat. I do remember the sweat.
Yeah.
LeBron James is glistening. Are you going to tell me this is not a new generation of video games? So
it's weird with
that.
this gen, at least with the console. So I'm thinking more specifically of the console launches coming up, because the big thing that's already been highlighted with them is the hard drives, because they're having SSD, they're having very, very fast hard drives built in, and then with the Xbox, a proprietary extended hard drive. And that's already a really cool thing. In fact, that's probably the thing we're going to notice the most. It's the lack of load times and the speed of games. And that's genuinely something I care about. It's not something that I'll be thinking about as I look at each game as I play it, but I'll appreciate it more.
Yeah, sure.
I guess it's just more difficult to have a video show you that than to go
Sure.
The fact that they're saying these are capable of rendering 8K, it's fuck off. You can't do 4 at the moment. 4 doesn't run properly with most things, so
yeah.
I don't believe you. I played through the Half-Life games in 4K. They're from 1998 though.
Yeah.
So in 20 years, maybe we'll be able to play fucking God of War 2 or whatever's coming out in 8K. But it's not. It has become less of a priority for me than frame rate, which didn't used to be the way that I was. But
I also think
the
the differences at the top level of things are always going to be less noticeable than the ones at the bottom. The difference between 4K and HD on a streaming service is negligible for me, for my eyes, but the difference between SD and HD is stark. It's made some things unwatchable now. I guess they just got to do it. They got to push technology forwards, and we just have to decide to not be wasting our money on it until, it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I guess it's just that these cards that they're touting as being capable of these things kind of aren't. Unless you're willing to pare back a whole bunch of other stuff that is maybe more important, like having a certain resolution or having a high frame rate. I guess you get to make those choices and whatever, but it's all not ready yet. And I guess that is part of pushing technology forward, is that it doesn't work properly straight away. But it's kind of cool. I guess it's just more that there's a lot of talk about it at the moment being like, wow, this is this crazy new thing and it's revolutionary. And I wish that I felt that same way, because having it on and off, like it looks okay, but I'm not fully appreciating having a fucking, wow, look at that corner of that room's pretty shady. Get a load of that. Wait, watch how this bucket is dark inside, but it's light on the outside. Get a load of that bucket. Neon sign, pretty fucking bright. Remember how they never used to be bright in video games? Well, now they're bright.
Oh, wow. Finally.
Yeah, I don't know. But I've got way too much time on my hands to think about it at the moment. So it's not really their fault.
Yeah, that does seem to be the main problem.
Yeah. I just talk for like half an hour about this shit that I'm also trying to make the point that I don't really care about, but I've talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What about
have you been
yourself,
playing some
Ben?
games, Tommy? I basically have not been playing anything. I'm adjusting to sort of having some part-time work back again in my life, and so I've just been working and then like watching TV. Like played a bit of Civ 5 again. Like I'm playing stuff that is genuinely like I've got half an hour and I want to relax and listen to a podcast. So like Civilization, a bit of City Skylines, those sort of games. Nothing really new, although there are a couple of games I'll be playing for next week. There's a game I've just downloaded that just came out. I think it's called something like Help Will Come Tomorrow, which is like it's like a sort of relationship management, party management game about a group of like 5 or 6 people who get like stranded in the Siberian wilderness. And so it's like you have a limited amount of like firewood, food, shelter, and you sort of manage the interactions between all the people, what you've got left, and you're trying to basically make it through the night and then the week and then, ongoing. Again, it's like those games I mentioned, like resource management, organization.
Yeah, cool.
Like
that sounds cool.
Yeah,
Practice.
it sounds fun. A bit of practice as well, absolutely. And then there's another game coming out called something like Cloud Front or Cloud Bound or something like that.
Is this the thing that you sent us? Cloud Punk?
Yeah. Cloud Punk, yes.
Frostpunk.
Yeah.
Not Frostpunk. I've played that. That's a great game. That's very fun. But no, yes, Cloud Punk, where you play like a delivery driver in a
Of course you couldn't remember that.
future.
Man, the people who are naming video games need to fucking get together and go like, all right, none of us can use the word Origins anymore. We're done with that fucking word.
Yeah.
Every
Cloud
video
Punk
game name is so similar.
I've probably read like 3 books called Cloud Punk as well in my life. Like it's very, very generic. But looking forward to that. So I'll have stuff for next week, but this week, not so much.
Yeah, I've just been chipping away at Final Fantasy 15. Had a pretty busy week. 7. Just playing a little bit of it here and there. Just kind of, treating it like a good book at the moment. The new releases have kind of slowed down a bit. Yeah, totally. The new releases have kind of dried up, so I'm sort of definitely feeling the, it's going to be harder for us with this show, having less new stuff to talk about every week. But on a personal front, definitely happy to have the time to just kind of, chew through what's sitting there without feeling the pressure of starting something new every other week, which was what was kind of happening for a couple of weeks there.
Well, and the same as I think a lot of similar podcasts to ours, and there are many similar podcasts, all of lower quality, but we'll have to,
we're the ray tracing of podcasts.
Raymond Tracing is my. We're gonna have to play some older stuff and talk about that, and it'll be fun to dig back into the vault. Like I said, I played all 3 of those original Half-Life games within the last week. Half-Life 1 and like the original version and Opposing Force and Blue Shift, and they're all still fun. That good little bit of comfort food we'll probably be eating for a few months.
Yeah.
For months and months, possibly years. Well, there's still indie games coming out. Like, that's the thing. The two games that I want to play for next week, they're smaller releases. Like, they look cool. They have interesting mechanics and styles. And people are still making those. Like, those are not, big production lines where people aren't allowed to go into the offices anymore. Like, these are people making them at home, with 2 or 3 people. So those games are still coming out. And if anything, it's giving me a chance to even just like know more about them. I just feel like we were totally tapped into the mainstream video game release cycle for like 4 years at least or something like that. So yeah, looking forward to that. I just started again Red Dead 2, which I haven't played since I dove into Final Fantasy VII Remake and Persona 5 Royal. So there's a lot of stuff to play that's just not AAA titles.
I got a lot of a lot of big between finishing the Final Fantasy VII Remake and then finishing the Persona 5 Royal, which will be me finishing Persona 5 for the first time. I'm pretty happy about just having that on the boil for a little bit. One bit of news this week that was very exciting to me was big update for Mario Maker 2. They've said it's the final update that they'll be adding. It adds the mushroom from Super Mario Brothers 2. Yep.
Did they say that it was the final update or the final free update?
Good point.
I feel like I saw people saying that the language was written in such a way that it was like, this is the final free update that we kind of promised you, but it did leave the door open for if they wanted to do some paid stuff down the line.
Yeah,
which I could see them not doing. I could see this definitely being the end for Mario Maker as a whole, let alone 2.
Yeah.
But
this was the last frontier, like having the overworld stuff. Because, we talked about it at the time. It's a fantastic game. It's like the complete package of what you would want this game to be now, I guess.
Yeah.
The only thing that they could really add from here would be like art styles that are just like completely the Wario Land art style. But then you're just getting into like a whole new terrain that's like probably pretty difficult to implement. So they've added the Mario Brothers 2 mushroom, which lets you pick up enemies and chuck them. They've added the Koopalings.
Sort of just with that one, it was I was kind of, it's cool that you can be like the Mario Brothers 2 version of Mario and pick things up or whatever. Sort of disappointing that it's not like a full tiled set or whatever. That was always the one sort of gap that they had there that I always just made the assumption they would fill.
Same.
But,
no. It is such a cool, or at least different aesthetic. It is a shame it's not in there.
Yeah. But this is an all right concession, like having some element from it in there. I mean, it's probably the most significant element gameplay wise of that game.
Definitely.
Is that you can ride stuff and pick stuff up.
And I could see that, making a whole Mario Brothers 2 thing would be a whole separate big, more difficult thing to do in the way of 3D World as well being in there. It would have to be all of these blocks are only usable in this thing. So maybe it doesn't actually really matter and this is a good middle ground. But
So the Koopalings are in there, a bunch of new enemies, a bunch of the little like kind of box things that you wear in 3D World, like that let you, you have a little cannon on your head and stuff like that. And as Ben mentioned before, probably the most significant update, the world map creator, which is something that I think I said when we reviewed it at the time, like would be awesome to see them implement. And really, really pretty, I think pretty drastically changes the way that people can make and share stuff. Because that was kind of my big thing about it at the time, like just kind of loading up one level and playing through that, and often it being quite a short experience. Like I kind of wanted to be able to just like lock in to a kind of a full thing that someone had made. And this now gives people the ability to make, I think you can make like 8 worlds and 40 courses or something like that.
And if you can, like if people do this with care, having an idea slowly ramp up in difficulty over those levels rather than generally what happens now, which is you have kind of the most difficult version of that idea in there immediately because they want to do the very clever thing that is like all of these elements combined, but it is less fun to play than that slow learning experience of figuring out how to do these new things and getting better at this skill that they can design now. So it's really cool to it's not implemented in a way that you can have, it doesn't appear to be like puzzles between the levels or whatever, like go to this level first so that you can turn on this switch and then the next level will be passable or whatever.
Yeah.
It is only a series of individual levels, so it's kind of just making one long level, but that's still cool. It gives people more scope to be able to
the distinction between, because like you're exactly right, Knox. What was happening was people were making a hard level and then you were usually playing it 4 or 5 or 6 times to get that mechanic down, to figure out what it was, or to just get good enough to do it. Right. And that's just by definition less interesting than seeing it unfold over a series of carefully designed and planned levels.
And the whole joy of those original Mario games was having all this new stuff introduced over time, having things build upon each other. That's most good video games, is slowly building blocks on top of what you already know to teach you more stuff and then demanding it of you at the end.
Yeah. And then adding in a bunch of extra boss fights that weren't in the original. Or am I looking forward a little bit too far to what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, we didn't even mention that at the start, did we? But
no.
I guess we'll just mention it at the end for people who want to stick around, and it'll be somewhere in the episode notes.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to. Kind of the beauty of you guys doing a sealed section over our current way of recording over Zoom is that previously I would have had to leave my own house and sit out in the street, whereas now I can just turn the recorder off and just mute the call and just watch you guys mouthing and gesticulating wildly on my screen.
You're gonna still watch? Okay.
I probably will
walk away.
I think I might just to try and put you off. I'll sit here and still watch.
You're a fucking freak.
No, you'll just see me pottering around my apartment, getting some little chores done. I'll probably water the fiddle leaf behind me.
Cool.
All right. Yeah, should we wrap it up for anyone who doesn't want to hear? So Ben and Adam have finished the Final Fantasy VII Remake and going to have a hot spoiler chat. But should we'll wrap up and then you guys just continue for anyone who wants to stick around.
Sure.
So thanks very much for joining us this week. If you are leaving us at the moment, if you're leaving us now, thank you for listening. We've got the Patreon that you can subscribe to and get a bonus episode every week. We just did one with Alexi Toliopoulos where he hopped on and recommended us kind of off-the-grid movies based on some of our favourite movies. It was a lot of fun. Went for a bit over an hour. Lots of good recommendations too that I'm looking forward to getting stuck into. We've got the Let's Plays up on our YouTube that you can check out. filthycasuals.com.au for all that kind of stuff. Thanks very much for listening.
Just to be clear as well, if you are still going to listen, there will be full spoilers for the entirety of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Yes.
We're going to talk about the ending in particular, and so if you don't want to hear that, turn it off after this, ends, and there'll be a little bit of music or whatever, and then we're going to do full on complete talk about the entirety of the story of Final Fantasy VII Remake, so don't stick around if you don't want that spoiled.
Yeah. Don't just leave this on if you're in the car or something. Pull over and unplug your phone.
And let's just pad out for a little bit of time here.
Sure,
plenty of going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we always give warnings when we're about to spoil something, and it still apparently does not get through to people.
Oh, really?
We really have no excuses now. We've talked for like 4 minutes about spoiling the game.
If you've tied yourself up in your podcast rig and haven't been able to undo the chains by now, then yell out that safe word and get someone to let you out, because you need to stop it if you don't want to hear spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Remake.
If you're one of the many listeners to our podcast currently practicing what is known as the self-suck, pull yourself out of that position.
The whole point of that is that you've still got your hands. So
exactly, that's it.
You should be able to just roll and do it. If you're currently performing surgery, honestly, they're a lost cause. You've got to stop this podcast over that, or at least get one of the nurses to do it. You'll get a bit of blood on your phone, but you need to do it.
This is actually stressing me out. Knox, when you edit this, can you just chuck in Stairway to Heaven now, just to make sure that people have plenty of time?
I'll put Inagata Vita completely full, in between this and there'll be a little bit of Final Fantasy music maybe, but yeah.
Okay, great. Well, as we say at the end here of every edition of Filthy Casuals.
Again, I cannot stress enough. I'm going to give you enough time to do this. Here's what your last chance. A little bit of a pause here for you to be able to do it. Hey, Ma, it's too shady over here. Ma, there's red light filtering through. That's a scene of Robert speaking in the hit sitcom Everybody Loves Ray Tracing. You've had enough time now.
You know what? I'm leaving. So if you still don't want to be spoiled and you're still sticking around, take this as your cue. One of the hosts is leaving his own podcast. So if this doesn't make it clear enough to you, then honestly, God help you. Yeah. All right. I'll see you boys
Tommy.
later. See you guys.
See you later, Tommy.
Bye. Have fun. Have fun talking about your little Playboy, your little gameplay, your little machines that you're on all afternoon. Bye.
You're on this podcast.
You're free to leave. Happy for you to leave at any point.
Wait, just to, if I click, if I click mute all, just tell me if this. Give me a thumbs up if you guys can still hear each other. Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
Yeah. Okay. I can hear myself. That doesn't help.
Oh no, hang on. Yeah. Okay.
Fucking
I'm just gonna have
hell.
to. All right. Bye.
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 Here we go.
We talked more about the transition to spoilers than we will about the end of the game. I'm certain of that.
But one very last time, the next little bit is going to have spoilers in Final Fantasy VII Remake. So if you're happy with that, please join us in the sealed section.
Yeah, it's great to be back in the sealed section. I guess people might be assuming that we're just, the end of this game is the same as the original and still sticking around even now.
Totally. If you finish the original Final Fantasy VII, you're not going to get as much warning, but still fucking stop listening because let's start spoiling this right now. This game is absolutely not a remake.
It's very different in what it has within the course of the game. I'm not convinced that it all has a direct and ongoing bearing on the playing out of the rest of the plot. I think that's what we disagree on. Because I loved it. I loved it all the way through. This is a 9.5 out of 10 game for me. So beautiful visually, so fun. I love the combat. I don't understand. Like I've seen a few people, some of our listeners have some issues with it. I just think it's fantastic. It's one of the most fluid, enjoyable combat systems I've ever played in a game.
I think with the combat, it was a sticking point for me early on as well that it was so similar to an action game that the timing of dodging and that sort of stuff was difficult for me to adapt to in what this game is asking of you. So I could see people having that trouble throughout the entire game and not really enjoying the combat, which I think has been a big complaint for people. But yeah, I agree that the combat is great once you kind of come to grips with it. And I also agree that our biggest difference on this game is in two parts. The execution of the ending and the implications of the ending, I think are the two big things that I want to talk about for sure.
Yes. What didn't you like about the execution of the ending?
So the last... what would you call it? Maybe hour and a half of the game is where it really ramps up with the stuff that was not in the original. Obviously,
it's essentially it gets to the end of the highway. And
exactly.
in the original game, you get to the end of the highway, you climb a little rope down, and then you leave Midgar. And that is not what happens at the end of this game.
No. And I think absolutely I will say, first of all, that conceptually, I think it's really cool, the idea that they've had for what to do with this remake. I think the idea of it being like a sequel, to my mind, is cool. And playing off the expectations of people who have played that first game and using them to create a new story that is like a direct result and... in direct opposition to what that first game was is cool.
Right.
I think that's a really good idea.
Potentially what future games are going to be this sort of like intellectual narrative conversation with what the original story was. And the expectations and the history of it, the nostalgia that people have for it, just like that in culture.
At best, it will be that weird like metatextual thing, which I think people are maybe giving a little too much credit for this one for saying that it contains that stuff. Because like there's people saying that like the whispers represent the fans and that they want everything exactly the same, but they're subverting that. Right. I'm willing to bet that the first time that is brought up to, I forget the name of the writer of this game, he grits his teeth and goes, yeah, definitely, I thought of that. 100%. Yep, 1 million,
right.
Yes. Absolutely. I think that's giving a little bit, maybe not, but the broader implication of the way that this deals with like the fact that the characters can see the future in parts and that they're trying to combat that, and the fact that the last thing the game says is the unknown adventure will continue, I think explicitly tells people that like the next game or games will not be as direct of a remake as this one is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I do think
for now,
that my feeling about it is, firstly, what's contained within the game that we played, I love all of it. It's great. I like how it plays out, or at least as a whole, I like it. I didn't love the existence of the whispery flying around things, but also I didn't really care. And in some stages, they looked cool, like the big finale with the Shinra Tower and them all swirling around. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting image. They're sort of creepy looking. But yeah, what happens within this game is essentially the same thing that happens in the original. Like Cloud sort of gets together with Avalanche. They start to fight Shinra. Sephiroth gets involved, and all of a sudden things pivot to this greater enemy that they're going to follow throughout the rest of the world. And by the end of this game, that's kind of what's happened. That is what's happened.
Yeah, the differences, the big ones in just how the story plays out, are A, that Sephiroth is involved right from the start, and B, that, well, taking away all the broader stuff about the story, I think, because I do like the idea of it, I think the way that it is done in that last hour and a half of the game is fucking terrible compared to the rest of the game. It is so rapid of a change. It is such a breakneck turn, not in necessarily terms of the plot that bothered me, but in terms of how the characters are reacting to all the stuff that's going on with them. All of them except for Cloud and I guess Aerith, who seems to know more than she's letting on or whatever, have no reason to know what the fuck Sephiroth is doing,
this is true.
Really is, why he's there, and all of a sudden they're like, yeah, man, let's go into that fucking portal. Not one of them is like, hey, quick question, what are we doing? And how are we suddenly powerful enough to fight Destiny?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I didn't mind all of that stuff, because like I love the original game. It's one of my favorite games, and this is a massive departure in tone as much as like literally what's happening. It's very anime. It's very sort of mystical, like spiritual, ethereal stuff that is in the original game, in the live stream stuff, but is much more in the original game. I think like just a metaphor for togetherness, empathy, and caring about the natural world. This is not that, right? Like this is something completely different.
And it's not built up to at all in the same way as the first game. The story slowly introduces each of these elements of like, you find out that Sephiroth is even involved around the same time in the story. Like the number of hours is obviously different, but in terms of the plot, you find out at the same time as this. And then if the original were to have transitioned to be like, suddenly everyone gets exactly who he is, wants to fight him, and knows that he's a threat to the planet, it would have been so weird. And that is exactly what happens here. And it's one of those things where I feel like it's only missing a few short lines of dialogue of Barrett going like, who the fuck is this guy? And Aerith going like, this is who he is. And you're like, oh, okay, cool.
Right.
Because like, they have set it up to be explained in later games. And I think that makes this first one suffer at the moment because it is a full story that absolutely doesn't make sense towards the end and ends on a cliffhanger that is not satisfyingly delivered to me.
Well, so it only doesn't make sense at all if you have never played the original, which is definitely a flaw. It's like empirically a flaw with this game. If what you're part of the sort of point is like this game should be accessible to anyone who plays it, whether they're 15 years old and have never played any of the original or don't know anything about it, or someone who's 35 years old and played the original and loved it.
Right.
But okay, I guess just from my own subjective perspective, I did play the original. I know the story back to front, and it feels like it was sort of made for someone like me who goes, okay, I'm imagining those lines of dialogue, I'm filling in those blanks.
Right.
And I think it's only really an issue of pacing. Like, it isn't an issue of like leaving out facts. It's more just like it's harder to come to grips with if you're viewing this as like a brand new, fresh story that's literally never been told before in any way.
Well, and if you're viewing it as that for the characters who are in it as well. I think that was my major problem with it.
Yes.
Is that group of people haven't been through this before, and yet they suddenly act in the way of the story being written from the point of view of someone who knows who Sephiroth is and knows what's going on. And like they've been shown, it kind of very vaguely shows them seeing glimpses of the future or whatever, so you can infer that was all the information that they needed delivered to them very quickly. But it doesn't convey that well enough that the story kind of holds together in itself in that last little bit. Like metatextually and all of that, I agree that it does make sense. I'm not confused by sort of the intention of what they're doing, of saying like, here's these multiple dimensions. And it's not that complicated. Sephiroth is more powerful than he seemed to be in the first one in some way, because he's clearly got this ability to travel either in time or interdimensionally to affect events so that, again, he wins.
Right.
And that overall is a really cool idea and a good way to do this remake, to bring back that sense of like danger and to bring something new to it for the people who have played the original. But then the fault of that is, like you said, it demands that people have played the original to get everything that they can out of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Which like is if you're doing a product review, you gotta say that and you gotta take points off. Like it's not a complete experience.
Right.
In and of itself.
And it is being marketed to people as though it is. They're saying it's the first part, but they're also saying it's a remake, which I would argue that it isn't, because the story directly contains references that are unexplained within this game to the original.
Yeah, I don't know about that though. Like I think like sure I think it's valid to be like, why did Barrett and Tifa and Red 13 just go along with everything at the end? And maybe the explanation is because what was happening was insane and how would anyone react in that situation? Like, oh, there's a evil guy who like with stuff like Sephiroth, it's like he looks like a villain. I mean, if I'm living in that world, I'm like, oh, that's the bad guy, definitely. You don't need to explain that to me.
I'm in anime world, sure, but like also a bad guy wouldn't have nice hair like that and like all the.
Sure.
I don't know about that. His little smile. I trust it for some reason, but
But so like, yes, it's weird that they just sort of go along with it, but maybe I don't know, like. I think you just go along with that as like an anime logic. Like, what else are they gonna
It just
do?
bugged me a bit towards the end when the rest of it had been so, like, had taken its time so much with exploring all these very emotional things of how these characters were feeling as well, and it went into that more deeply than the original game did.
Yes,
Barrett's feelings of anxiety around whether or not Marlene's safe was the big one that I thought was done really, really well in this game.
Sure. I mean, all of the stuff about
her and all of that stuff.
Avalanche being potentially in the wrong, you know, like being possibly responsible for the deaths of thousands of people as revolutionaries fighting against an evil and oppressive regime. It's like, well, that's a very interesting theme to explore, and they did, and they fleshed that out heaps. I think
to have that much.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to have that much put into it for there, and then in the last hour and a half to have the only kind of new stuff, or like most of the new stuff that you're not ready for in the game to all come bombarding at you at once, and then to not have a few lines in there of having these characters who you now have so deeply over that time explored, to suddenly have their personalities be taken away from them, it felt like was a weird kind of jarring thing, where even if just Aerith and Cloud seem to kind of get what's going on. Cloud knows he's seeing visions of this guy, and this guy wants something from him. Aerith seems to have some understanding of what is taking place beyond what she is telling them, which, you know, you see those flashes of Marlene and Red 13 kind of being able to see into her head or whatever, and going like, oh, cool, I get it. So even having like just Aerith go to all of them, they're like, what the fuck's this? And she's like, don't worry, we got to do this. Trust me. And they're like, okay, I guess you help Marlene, sure.
Right.
It was just that little bit of it seemed missing to me, where it made this whole extra fight seem really almost like gratuitous. And like, I get you need to put a big boss battle at the end, but it didn't earn for me, through how emotional the rest of the game had succeeded at being, this big twist that it is doing. It felt a little cheaper because it wasn't explored as deeply as these other things, and that might be rectified in retrospect with the subsequent games. But
I think the reason that I don't mind as much is I don't believe they're going to change the upcoming games heaps. I think what they're doing here is giving themselves the ability to change it slightly. Like it's removing the need to stick to every single plot point. I think they're just giving themselves the room to move slightly away from what originally happens, to make it harder to predict, possibly, but also to remove that sort of sword hanging above them of like, you have to stick to the original game in every subsequent part, or the fans will get really mad at you. I don't know that it's like... I think it's done for creative reasons more so than like... for reasons to allow some creativity within the scope of the existing games, rather than blowing it all up and doing something new. I think that's why I'm not as bothered by it, is because I don't expect them to change things wholesale.
I do, and I'm not bothered by that. I like the idea, and I think it's exciting for me, having played both, you know, the original as well. Because if you look at the changes that they have already made, like several major characters are still alive who were dead. Or there's something with Zack being in some way alive, and maybe a parallel universe, who knows? Yeah. Sephiroth's whole thing is completely different now. You've already fought him. He already has some kind of intention for you. He's communicating directly with Cloud. That whole thing is different in this game, and certainly I don't think we'll get less different in future games.
Sure.
Like, Biggs is still alive for some reason. At least.
That's odd. Yeah, that was odd.
And I wonder if it is to set up the expectation that, hey, people who died in the original can survive, maybe. Who knows? Yeah. Maybe Aerith's okay. Who knows?
And I think they're going to do that, and then they're going to shrug it off, and then they're going to go through with killing her. That's what I think. It's like, you think... So Wedge dies, doesn't he? Wedge survives initially and then dies later on. And then, but Biggs is the one who survives.
Yeah, because he gets sucked off by those... by the whispers in the elevator, right?
Yes. Yeah. But then late at the very end, like, Biggs wakes up in his bed and he's alive. What I think, and so this is, I think, how I feel about all of the very, very sort of metaphysical stuff that happens in the game. All of the stuff that's sort of like interdimensional or weird, you know, like mental images and Sephiroth communicating psychically with everyone. It's not, and I know that this is like, in the original game, the metaphysical stuff had as much bearing on the plot as the physical stuff. But I kind of am treating, personally, what happened in this game in metaphysical instances as outside of sort of what's important to me. Like, it's all representative of stuff. Like, it's Sephiroth and Cloud having a mental battle metaphorically, and like, I'm just sort of taking it more as like storytelling devices, ways to sort of turn emotions and like mental battles into something you can see. And then the actual differences that have happened in the world that we've seen are Biggs survives, and
But they so explicitly say, we don't know what's going to happen now. Everything is different now. This is an untraveled ground. The game brings up a fucking thing saying like, hey, fucking James Bond will return. Like, the changes are so dramatic in their presentation, and the implications, if you take them at face value, are so big that I would be kind of disappointed if the second part was just a remake of the second portion of Final Fantasy VII, because they've had this cool idea, and I think that if they then deliver on the possibilities of that, it will make my feelings about how this changes different. Because at the moment, with this as an individual isolated thing, the ending detracts from the overall product if it is to be a direct remake.
Right.
But the ending adds
it's sort of an
to the idea of this
unnecessary
being a
weird
sequel.
sidestep at the end. It's poorly paced, and it's just not as good.
Right. Exactly. If they then brush off everything they did at the end of this one for the second part and say, now we're in fucking Nibelheim, and now we're in, here's that big snake, and everything's the same, don't worry about it. I think that would then make me solidify my feelings of discomfort with the ending of this one, because it means that they were just like, we need a big boss battle at the end. What if we don't want to fight Sephiroth? We should do it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
That's what I think is what they thought. Like, how do we do like an interesting and creative and weird... Yeah, how do we come up with an interesting way to do that, to integrate or include or add weird boss battles at the end of this chapter? I just feel like, I don't know if it's going to be this wholesale change. I think it's probably going to be a more subtle touch, a subtle series of changes in the upcoming games. I don't know, because you're right. Like it's implying significant change. I don't know. I'm not overly pessimistic about it. What I don't think is going to happen is it's not going to refer to fucking a book that was written, 10 years ago. By someone who's not actually involved in the game. I don't think it's going to draw on story elements from Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. I don't think we're in danger of any of the theories that I've seen on Reddit being true.
Sure. I think it already has done that a little bit much, or a little bit more than you would have expected, for sure. And I guess I don't really mind if it does do all that stuff, because it's the same world, right? You're still going to go to the same locations, which is I guess the main part of a remake anyway, is seeing all that stuff be redone. I personally, I'm totally okay with the idea of them making this a new story and a sequel and everything, as long as they deliver it well, which just the last sort of hour and a half, 2 hours of this is not done well.
Right.
That's for fair. Me, it just, like, the dialogue made a big change. All of a sudden, Cloud can cut a fucking bus in half that's flying at it like that. Just the whole tone completely shifted at the end there, where it's like, fucking, why are you fighting? I don't get why you're like, hey, let's kill Destiny because fucking Sephiroth told you to as well. Like, you don't know this cunt. He's showing up and he's being like, hey, I killed you, Barrett, but now you kill someone for me, please. And he's like, yeah, I guess we got to. What the fuck? What do you mean? No, that doesn't make any sense. Don't do that.
Yeah. I don't know. I just was along for the ride. I didn't think that it was ever going to... I sort of categorized all of that stuff at the end as not being as important as what I thought was like actually happening in the real world of the story. Maybe that is only because I played the original and have that story in my head and can refer back to it and have nostalgia for that and have that make sense. But I almost just, like compartmentalized it as like, oh, this is happening in not reality. And so I'm not as bothered by it. And I'm enjoying the fights. Like I really loved playing it. I loved playing through the ending, regardless of how ridiculous the story was. I thought it was really, really fun.
The music was really cool.
Great.
And like, even though it's like weird, the reasons why it's happening, hearing the fucking Sephiroth big theme and all of that is cool.
Yeah.
And that is definitely a part of why they did it. And I guess you're only fighting his clone, right? Is that the thing? Or like, I didn't even know this until I was reading stuff about the ending, but that Sephiroth you're following for all of 7 is a clone or something.
Right. Yeah. Because at the end of the original, you find the real one in the crater at the top. It's this giant. He's a monster. But all of the ones that you're coming across, I guess in the remake as well as the original, are the Genova clones of Sephiroth, I think.
Because the two apparently that you're seeing in the remake, and I didn't get this from the actual game, which again I take to be not a sign of me being a fucking dumbass because I know that already, but more a sign of the game has not expressed itself. But those two clones who you see, the one who's like in the kids' playground and the one who's your neighbor, there's two apparently Sephiroths that you see during the game, and those are the two.
I think I got that. They call them different names. One of them who's in the apartment next to you, and the one you see later on. But also, it does rely on you remembering that aspect of the original because...
and I guess
I
one
think
of
the
them
first time I
jumps off
played
the roof. When you climbs that big tower. Yeah.
When the helicopter's there. The first time I played the original, I did not understand the story, I think, at all. Like, certainly the reunion stuff was not something I picked up on until I was older because I did play it as a kid. But like, knowing that and understanding that, knowing that, all of these weird guys in black cloaks and Cloud are just like genetic offcuts and clones of the original Sephiroth or Genova or a mix. I guess I'm still
Genova
unclear on that.
At some point, Sephiroth was a clone of Genova, or in some way, Sephiroth is that meteor.
Yes.
Right? That like hit the Earth, and either that thing has taken over the actual person's brain or he was that all along or whatever it is. But I like the idea more that this is the Sephiroth from the original somehow time traveling or whatever and trying to win again, and everything will change because of that. I think that's a really cool idea. It wasn't delivered well in the last tiny portion of this game as a twist, which I take it to be, but in retrospect could become absolutely fine. If the second game opens with Tifa being like, hey, what the fuck was that? Like, I didn't say anything at the time because I was like, hey, I guess these guys know what they're doing, but that fucking confused the shit out of me. Then
Right.
I'll be like, Tifa, you're right. Good core work. Your abs are great.
Yep.
Keep it up.
And then someone please explain what the fuck's going on.
Yeah.
And then we can go on our quest.
If it is that thing, and I'm surprised that I guess the lack of import that you've given it towards, or with your impression of how it factors into the story, because if it is just a side thing, then I think that's also really fucking weird.
I think I've compartmentalized it in my experience of playing the game that we just played because it's like a 9.5 out of 10. And if I treat that as not being that important, it doesn't change my experience of that game. It made the end fun with some battles and stuff, but I can disregard the final 20 minutes of story from a 40-hour game.
Right. Those are the only important parts of the story to me now, because the implications of that story are that, hey, that whole first part of the game was actually about this. And you played those same events again because it's this new one. And like the whole time throughout, it makes the Whisper stuff make sense of them trying to keep it all the same, because that's like the planet or some separate thing that is fate or destiny or whatever, trying to make sure that Sephiroth doesn't win. And then he somehow convinces you to kill that. The fact that he's like, hey, you got to kill Destiny. But I guess he shows each of those people like, okay, so Aerith's going to die, Red 13. You're like running through a canyon and you're afraid of that for some reason. Barrett, I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess you're just fine, but you're still going to join in.
And then a meteor is going to come and destroy the Earth.
Oh, yeah, they do. He shows them that. But
yeah.
But that doesn't happen in it. So I don't know, maybe he...
No, that's the thing. That's what I sort of perceived as happening, is that they are seeing glimpses of the future, which is what happens in the original game. And in the original game, they defeat Sephiroth and the meteor gets stopped and everyone survives. Like that thing of Red 13 running through the canyon is the ending of the original game where they succeed.
It's like... And it's like nature's back and they're all happy, right? That's
totally,
like the very
it
last
is
shot.
Because like the meteor maybe destroys like Midgar or something. Like obviously the weapons come, like stuff changes in the original game, but it changes for the better in the very end.
So if they see all that and are like, nah, let's roll the dice again, I reckon we can do it. or they've been shown the wrong thing by Sephiroth or whatever.
That's what I think. I think Sephiroth is showing them what happens in the original game, what happens in their future in a misleading way. Because, no one wants Aerith to die, but she does die in the original game, or in the original story timeline, as a sacrifice to save the world. So I think it's not as straightforward as, this is an alternate vision of the future, now we've separated entirely from it, and I think it's just a way that Sephiroth is using the live stream or whatever in the future and the past to confuse them. I don't think it's as clear-cut as now everything's different.
I wouldn't necessarily either as well if it weren't for the fact that right at the end it says, now everything's different. Like that it might as well say that last little title. It's like, hey, by the way, fuck your sequels. We're going off the rails, baby. And I'm excited for that in some way, but I also think it's a little bit disappointing for people who weren't looking forward to that, but I personally couldn't give a shit about remakes in general, so...
Yeah, I mean, I that could still just be a very generic, hey, if this is the first time, if you're playing this game for the first time, you don't know what's going to happen next. The sequel's going to come out in a couple of years, and you're going to have a very big adventure, and you don't know what's going to happen.
That is a wild interpretation of that. If it's hey, specifically, if this is the first time you're playing this, don't play the original, please. I don't know.
What I genuinely think is that they're sort of sitting on the fence. I think there's going to be some differences. I think most of it's going to be the same. I don't think it's going to be this massive change. That's what I think. I don't know if that's what I want. I think I would love the sort of thing that you're predicting, which is a very big departure and a new kind of story within the same world. I think that'd be great because, I have got the original always to refer back to.
Right. And I think how bombastic that ending is and how much, the fact that you are killing a manifestation of destiny, I think is as clear of a way as they possibly can of conveying, we do not intend to continue this as a direct remake series.
Yeah. See, I think I'm not, I think I'm a little less charitable. I think they're saying, don't hold us to account on what the original game is. We'll make some changes and you're not allowed to complain about it. That's my interpretation, and it could be wrong.
We have no idea, right? And I think that's my biggest problem with the ending is that it deliberately makes things so unclear that it is just an unsatisfying cliffhanger either way. And just for what I interpret what they're trying to do, for them trying to convey, what I see it as, they didn't do a very good job right at the end there because it just goes so quick. It so rapidly turns and changes that it just didn't feel like it had the same care put into it as the rest of it.
I understand that. I disagree because I had less writing on it and still enjoyed it. But fuck. I'm very curious to see what happens next.
Same.
I'm really, really interested. And I think they did execute most of this game so well at such a high level that I'm just excited to play whatever comes next.
Totally. I'll play it either way. I would, at this point, prefer it to be a sequel that makes the ending of this make sense in context. But I guess when they start talking about the second part, they kind of have to show their cards, right?
Surely, yeah. If you're spot on in your interpretation, it wasn't a remake. It was this alternate interpretation. It's specifically, it is metatextually interacting with the original text and changing it. They've got to cop to that, surely.
Yeah. It's called Final Fantasy VII 2 or something in my mind. Is this next bit is a sequel to this game, which is a reinterpretation in a massive way of the first one, or kind of a sequel to the first one.
Yeah.
The only way that this story at this point in time makes sense is if you have fully played the original game. So that to me makes it a sequel.
Yeah, it's new. I think that's whatever it is. It's not been done before. I don't think
it's cool. It's almost cool on a fucking Kojima way of hey, Metal Gear Solid 2 is not actually about Snake anymore, and also it's about sequels sucking. Fuck you.
Right.
And this doesn't deliver it anywhere near as well as that right at the last little hurdle there, but conceptually, I think it's really, really cool. And
sure, yeah, conceptually remakes are boring, so we're doing something different with it.
Yeah. If the next one is them actually doing something different with it and they admit that, then cool. I think there is an argument to be made that the misrepresentation of this one, in my mind, as part one of an entire remake is a little bit dicey and weird, but I don't know if it even is that still. And if it is just a straight up remake for the last parts, then why have this big weird fucking battle here? Like, then it makes that not make any sense.
If it's a straight remake for the next however many parts, don't have all the weird story stuff at the end. Just have a big battle. Like, just say Sephiroth showed up and you have to fight him at the end and he has a bunch of forms. Like, do it at the end of the freeway
another
and
one of the
whatever.
Geneva things, or like there's some fucking Midgar thing. You're fighting a big turret that's on the top of the tower. Like, there's any number of big final bosses you can pretend should be there. The fact that they've chosen to do it this way, and to me it has such wide-reaching implications for the story, is interesting, but delivered poorly to me.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see because like I've seen a lot of people theorizing about it. I've seen a lot of people putting a lot of thought into what actually happened and what's going to happen. I don't think I've read anything that I 100% agree with, and I'm not convinced that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think theorizing in terms of that stuff is that interesting usually. Like, that's what I hated about shows like Lost and stuff like that. I don't really care about the theories. I just want to see what plays out. There's no point really theorizing about it. But I want to hear from people who have finished this game. I want to hear if you're people who've played the original, if you haven't, what you think about it. If you read theories and it changed your perception of the game, if you're sort of like me and just disregarded it. Yeah, I'm really keen to hear from people. I guess don't tweet spoilers at us publicly or post on our Facebook page or anything.
Yeah.
But,
and also, like, probably don't even email them to us because Tommy hasn't finished it. So I don't know where
just
we
put in
talk
the
about
spoiler. Put in the spoiler to Adam and Ben.
True.
Final Fantasy spoilers inside. Don't read Tommy, and then send us what. No Tommy's allowed. Or just tweet at us, DM us individually. Of course, that's all fine.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But yeah, fucking fascinating. Very, very interesting. Very curious to see what happens with the sequels.
It's the last thing I expected from this game was to be surprised like this. So
yeah.
At least on that level, pretty cool. Whether or not the surprise was like, if somebody jumps out at you and instead of yelling surprise, they go like slurp eyes. And you're just like, oh, you got it a bit wrong right at the end. But the intention there is pretty cool. And I want to see you follow up on the party that you've promised by jumping out there. But they like tripped over my coffee table as they jumped out. So.
But yeah, that'll bring us to the end of the sealed section this week. We'll definitely revisit this when Tommy finishes the game in 6 or 7 months' time.
Yeah, when they announce the second part, we'll be able to talk about what the implications are.
Yeah, but thanks for listening to the sealed section, everyone. We'll see you next week on Filthy Casuals.
See you later.